Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Making Action Happen. I'm Sarah Blackhurst.
And I am Brian McCain.
So this is kind of a special episode, and it's a little bit late, and so we apologize for that. But honestly, we didn't realize how popular this particular episode is, and we've done it for, 3 years now? This will be our fourth year or something like that.
Halloween, or this is our third, I don't know. Our Halloween
episode. So there's this thing, I love stories. I always want to know everybody's stories. I'll often greet you with, what good stories do you have for me? So Brian, I have no idea what Brian's going to share today, but he's got some good Halloween. So get ready for your spooky Colorado, maybe true, maybe not.
Yeah,
I don't know. So I'm very excited about this episode.
So the last few times we've done this, we looked up urban legends, like we talked about UFOs in the Valley, cattle mutilations,
the Espinosa brothers.
Pigman at City Park, the Haunted Grave, the Honor Farm, so all this stuff that's kind of local stuff. So I have a few more of those. But I was thinking, so I reached out to some people that I was in the military with and some other old stuff, old previous careers, just asking spooky stories. So I did get some military ones. So yes. I was gonna do this one not necessarily based off of urban legends or Google most haunted places in Colorado. The Stanley Hotel kind of thing. Which, by the way, my in-laws stay at the Stanley every year because they love horror movies and horror stuff, and Halloween's our favorite holiday in my family, including my wife and kids.
Yeah,
maybe Christmas is number one, Halloween's number two, but they're pretty even. It's my kids have 2 to 3 costumes for Halloween, so they got their school costume, their pre-Halloween costumes when you go to parties or gatherings or whatever. And then they have their scary Halloween costume, which unfortunately you cannot wear scary Halloween costumes to school anymore, which I'm all about freedom. And if my kid wants to dress up as Pennywise the Clown in 2nd grade, he should be able to. But apparently that's not allowed anymore.
And your wife decorates inside and out.
Yeah.
It's really serious.
No, it's good.
And you do like this creepy stuff.
Yeah, I like that, but I never dress up for Halloween, which is really funny. Although last year I went as myself for Halloween with a mask of myself on Halloween. Anyway, so this one, instead of really concentrating on the urban legends and the local stories, I decided to do the third party stories or the hearsay. This is all hearsay. You hear it, and it's specifically, it kind of goes to the UFO stuff we're hearing now, because we have David Grush and these whistleblowers, and other than the pilots that saw the stuff and they're this is what we saw, but a lot of this stuff going on in Congress with the UFOs, it's always hearsay. It's well, I heard of these programs, they did this. David Grush said there's programs, we have crashed vehicles, and it's all stories he has read about or heard about but never firsthand experience. So with the theme of that, I thought, here's some stories of people that I've been in the military with, known all my life, and not just the average person. I'm talking about people that, one's the director of a huge program with DOD and aerospace that is the expert and guy in charge of this major program stuff he's seen. And but I'll tell one of my own. So
yes.
This one is, this is different. So I was going to call it the time I met a man in black. So as you know, there is the legend of the Men in Black. Now, we've all seen the movie, the Will Smith movie, and the later one and stuff. So the Men in Black are these guys that there's a UFO or ghost or paranormal conspiracy, and you have these men in black that work for the government or maybe affiliated, or who knows. They're just these dudes in black suits that show up and ask questions, and all the reports say they're very weird, no sense of humor, kind of look different, straight face, no smile, no cringe, just show up to the house, ask questions about oh, I saw a UFO. And then these 2 dudes show up at my house in black suits and ask me questions about it. And then they leave.
Wait, this really happened?
Allegedly, this happens to people that see UFOs.
Oh,
and there's
okay.
like actual video on YouTube where you could see where it's like, Men in Black came to my work because I saw a UFO, and there's like video of them walking in. I think a lot of it's like marketing campaigns for the TV show The Fringe, because there's always a man in black in the background when that show is on. But anyway, it's been going on since like the 70s. So like the Men in Black movie with Will Smith was actually a comic book, and it was about government agents that there's like aliens and monsters and ghosts and stuff, and they're just trying to keep it hush hush because nobody needs to know about this because civilization will fall apart. So the Men in Black's job is to go and fix these. It's like, oh, it was just swamp gas, and then they fight the aliens or whatever on the side. So I'm sitting in work, and this was about 10 years ago, and working for the government. We'll just put it out there. But there was a bad natural disaster in Colorado and some of the surrounding states. And so how FEMA works, most people don't realize this. So when there's people that work for FEMA full time.
Right.
But there's people that are like assigned to FEMA and deployed with FEMA. And the ATF is kind of this way too. So it's like, say there's a forest fire or some natural disaster in your state. And then FEMA is mobilized, which, FEMA, their job is not to directly stop the emergency. FEMA is really there to take care of after.
Yeah,
like a lot of people get this confused. So not only a scary story, but maybe a scary government story where it's like FEMA didn't do anything for us. Like, well, that's not their job. Like their job is to come in, provide funding, mitigate this the best as possible. Like they have the federal government backing them. It's like, these houses were destroyed. Okay, FEMA is going to come in and give trailers for people to live in until insurance kicks in and they could, get money or whatever. So this guy from FEMA shows up at the office, and we knew somebody from FEMA was coming in. And so I get a knock on the door, and there's this dude, appropriately in a black suit with a hat, like a fedora hat, which in the Men in Black stuff, they always have that. So this guy comes in, and if you're listening, I forget your name, but if you're listening, show at action22.org, because I want like some explanation of this. So this guy comes in. I know somebody from FEMA is coming in this week, and he comes in. He's like, "Hey, I'm so-and-so from FEMA." I'm like, "Oh, cool." And he comes in, and I had this map of the state.
Wait, back up for a second. So he's very average looking.
Yeah,
white
just like
male,
a tall white dude.
And he's wearing a hat. Did he take the hat off when he came in?
Yes.
Okay.
He took it off and set it on the table, because we had a table right there, and he took it off and set it down.
Okay.
Introduced himself. Never gave me a card. This is where it gets weird. So he's like, "Hey, I'm from FEMA." And I'm like, "Oh, cool." And he's looking at the map. He's like, "Yeah, this is what's going on. I'm deployed out of, I think it was either Nebraska or Utah or Wyoming. It was one of the surrounding states." He's like, "Yeah, I work for the Forest Service. Like normally I think he said like a public affairs guy or something like that." And he's like, "I got mobilized and I took this. So we're just doing our outreach to all the offices and, local government and stuff as a resource, blah, 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 blah." So I'm like, okay, cool. And he's just checking the box. So when things like this happen and you work in a congressional office, you meet with people and it's just checking the box. Yeah. Like regardless if you need their help or not, they're kind of required. And it's a courtesy to say like, "Hey, we're in town.
We're here.
I'm going to meet with
blah,
the congressional
blah.
staff, the local government staff, the state staff, all this stuff. This is me. I'm a resource. Use me." That's it. So he sits down. He's like, "Yeah." And we're talking about the fire. And or it might have been the mudslide. I can't remember, but it was something like that. And he's like, "Well, you cover the San Luis Valley." I'm like, yeah, that's in our area. And he's like, "You ever go down there?" I'm like, "Oh, yeah." And he's like, "You ever go to the UFO Watchtower?" And I'm like, "No." And he's like, "Oh, well, my girlfriend," which right there is odd because the guy's like 60-ish. And he's referring to his girlfriend. Like normally when somebody's that age, they're like, my partner or my wife or, mostly they don't, it's like a 60-year-old man.
And they don't usually get that familiar that quickly, right?
And they don't. And like, it was just odd that this like very put together government kind of bureaucrat dude's like, "My girlfriend." I'm like, okay. He's like, she's really interested in UFOs and like crystal healing and stuff and Bigfoot. And like, we have a lot of Bigfoot sightings where I'm at, and I've never seen Bigfoot, but we get a lot there and we investigate every report. And I'm like, "Oh, that's cool."
In Nebraska?
Yeah, wherever he was from, Utah, Nebraska, somewhere, wherever Squatch is out there. also in Colorado right now, which we'll talk about that in a second.
Oh, yay.
Anyway, so he keeps asking these questions like, okay. I'm like, okay, like, well, with the fire or whatever it was, I'm like, this is what we're doing. We have the emergency management center here. Like they're up and running, communication. This is our press guy, blah, 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 blah. And he's like, well, have you ever been to the UFO watchtower? And I'm like, no. And he's like, do you get a lot of reports from constituents down there about UFOs? I'm like, yeah, every now and then, like, it's the valley. It's kind of crazy. And that's like the history and the culture of the valley. And he's like, is there anywhere I could read about this more? I'm like, no, yeah. And then he's like, well, if I came back, would you take me down there and introduce me to the UFO watchtower people and maybe talk to some of these people about the cattle mutilations and UFO?
And he's here for a mudslide or a fire.
Yeah, whatever it was. It was some natural disaster. I think it was a fire at the time. You'll have to go back like 2015-ish to see what was going on. Probably a lot of fires. And
I asked too many questions.
Yeah, no. I think it was a fire. I mean, again, there were so many fires in the past 10 years. I can't remember, and a lot of FEMA dudes. But he's like, okay. He's like, well, if I come back, can you introduce me to some people down there and talk about like the cattle mutilations and like the black helicopters? And I'm like, this is really weird And I thought maybe he just had an interest in it. But it was weird that he turned the conversation into this. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, well, I got to go to a meeting. Nice to meet you. And he's like, yeah, nice to meet you too. I'm like, I didn't catch your name. And it was something like, he's like, I'm Steve. And I'm like, do you have a card? And he's like, no, they haven't given me any cards yet. And he left. And I was like, okay, I get it. Like maybe he's like, again, a park ranger in Wyoming or Utah or something. Forest ranger, like,
and a black
doesn't get
suit
out.
with a fedora.
Like maybe he's like, cool. Like maybe his girlfriend really was into UFOs and like Crestone, Colorado, and like the monks and Buddhist stuff there. Cause it is kind of the capital for
Crestone
Colorado
is
with that.
Pretty cool.
And like he never gave me a card, no contact information, just said he'd get a hold of me. Well, 2 days later, the FEMA guy showed up and I was like,
what?
I was like, yeah, your buddy was here. I was like, he's asking about like Bigfoot and UFOs and stuff. He's like, no, nobody from FEMA's been here. I was like, what? And I called up my boss at the time. I was like, I think I just got visited by Men in Black. And there was like no record of a FEMA guy coming to our office. But the thing is, he had information. Like about he left a handout about like the numbers of calls. So it's just like either some random dude showed up and acted like he was a FEMA guy, but he had the information to back it up and he knew more than anybody else did.
That is
But
creepy.
FEMA was like, or they're trolling me this whole time too. It could be that. It could be a joke. Because I would totally do that to somebody when I
you would totally do that.
So yeah, so that was my Man in Black.
That's not. It's not easy to pull a prank on you.
No, but that one was just so weird.
That is
bizarre.
Super weird. And so, do you think? Okay, let's go with a Man in Black theory. So why you?
I don't know. Maybe I was Googling UFOs on a government computer all the time. Like, I don't know. It was to this day, it was so bizarre. It was like this guy showed up and claimed to be this dude, nothing to gain from it, asked a lot of weird questions and left. And then FEMA came and they're like, no, we never sent anybody. This is the guy for the region. So
that's
like, and for somebody to know how FEMA works like that, it's just, again, maybe it was a prank show, but I don't know. But anyway,
you never heard or saw from him again?
No, never again. And even Scott asked me about it. Like, later he's like, did you ever hear what happened to this guy? And Josh, who I used to work with too, he's like, that was weird. Like, we tried to find the guy. At the same time, my coworkers would play many pranks on me and jokes, and I don't think this was one because they were just like dumbfounded. And it's not that funny if it was like,
no, it's a little.
Anyway, so also during this time we had a Bigfoot sighting in Colorado.
Okay, where?
So I think it was I'm going to pull that up right now.
You know what my feeling is on this, right? Do you know, have we ever had this discussion?
Bigfoot's a psychic alien coming to eat us all.
No.
Oh, that's what somebody told me once.
That doesn't make it.
I not say? Okay. So in Silverton, Colorado, you could find this now about 2 weeks ago.
And Silverton Silverton's how far from us? Like 2 or 3 hours?
Yeah, something like that. So they have like a tourist train that goes, and there's a video, you could find it online, Bigfoot in Colorado, and there's like a Bigfoot like stomping around the field. And they're like, what is that? But at the same time, there's a company right there by the train called Sasquatch Expedition Campers.
I saw this.
And they have a guy that dresses like Bigfoot that like goes around
and waves at the train.
So it probably wasn't a legitimate Bigfoot sighting, but it was still kind of cool because like if you watch the video, like it totally is a guy in a suit, like totally. But everybody's like, this is the most like accurate Sasquatch sighting in Colorado.
I know. I saw that.
But come to find out, it's like, yes, the company Sasquatch is like literally
they just found something
5
really
miles
tall.
away. Yeah. Oh, they have an employee that does it. That's really tall.
Oh, that's really cool. I wonder if we can book him for like parties and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. He does all their marketing stuff. So
I love that.
To join.
No. Bigfoot, that's real. They're in Alaska. They're in Points North.
Supposedly they're in Colorado Springs.
No, I'm not buying that.
It was on Unsolved Mysteries.
I know. I'm not buying that. I'm just telling you.
I know.
They're in Alaska.
Or they could just be people living way off the grid.
Taisanke Harbor. I've been there. It's real.
Are they Bigfoot up there or are they Wendigo? Because isn't that the...
No, that's Kushaka. The Kushakawu are the, so it might be the same thing, different, but they're already a part of, they were part of the vernacular before.
So like Bigfoot,
white people said they weren't
Bigfoot is like the missing link, right? Bigfoot is like the between ape and man.
I'm not buying that either.
But then, considered. And
yeah.
Then the Wendigo is the hunter that kind of goes off the grid too long and turns into the Wendigo.
Yeah. I've heard that. I think that's white people's stories.
No, that's the native story. Wendigo. It's I forget the tribe, but it was a hunter that gets caught up in the hunt too far and turns like feral and becomes a Wendigo and transforms.
So in the
like down here, it's like the skinwalkers.
Yeah.
Like
so in the native up there, so the Tlingit and the Haida, it's Kushtakawu, and it's they're a cross between a man and an otter, but they're big. Yes. But Kushtaka is like, that's the scary, like that's the river otter that they'll come and take your soul.
Yeah.
But the Kushakawu is the animal. And that was already a part of that.
Okay.
So that was already part of the, before anybody moved up there, that was, they're like, okay, raven, bear.
Yeah.
Kushtakawu.
And then the Wendigo is from the Great Lakes natives and the First Nations.
Okay.
It's a creature with human-like characteristics, which possesses you. So you get possessed by the Wendigo.
Yes.
And then the Wendigo is said to invoke feelings of insatiable greed and hunger and desire to cannibalize other humans. So that's like the Wendigo. It's like the hunter that gets greedy or whatever, goes out there and gets possessed by the spirit and then comes back and starts to eat people.
Kushaka will take you and then you're kind of in limbo. Like you become one of them
and
then you can't,
this one you'd like
separates you from your
evil.
family and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just trying to remember. Do you ever watch the show Supernatural?
Of course.
Has all that. Yeah. When they had the Wendigo.
Yes. That's right. That's right.
Too much and got
the
possessed.
Winchesters.
Yeah. So okay.
So what's your next story?
So with that, we'll do another kind of more of an urban legend one.
Yay.
That I don't think we touched on this one, but it reminded me of something when I was asking stories. So we have, let me find it here. So it's the haunted tunnels of Gold Camp Road. So this is in Colorado Springs. I think it's towards the mountain, kind of towards NORAD. And the reason why this came up, because I was asking some of my old buddies, because military, like veterans, like love to share like weird stories. Like it's always like, yeah, man, like I don't believe in ghosts, but hey, one time I saw this. Right. Or I don't believe in aliens, and one time I saw this.
Right.
And what reminded me of this, I was at NORAD at the time, just hanging out there for a couple of days for something. Like, I mean, it was like a TDY. No, it was.
He was just hanging out at the most secure place on the planet.
I mean, it was like literally in a gate shack, just going up and chatting with some of my fellow service members. But
okay, yeah, this one time he was
they were talking about the Gold Camp Road, and I never thought about it. And then I was pulling up this list of like haunted stuff, local stories, kind of thing here in Colorado, and so there's these roads there, and there's tunnels. There's like 3 tunnels by Cheyenne Mountain, that kind of area. So I'll just read it verbatim from this Denver Gazette. Kudos to Denver Gazette.
Yay, Denver Gazette.
So if you're from the Colorado Springs area, there's a good chance that you're well aware of the tunnels at Gold Camp Road. a spectacular drive that carves its way through North Cheyenne Canyon. There are three tunnels in total, one of which is sealed off by huge gates and located past where cars can easily drive. Various stories surround what makes these tunnels haunted, but the story behind what's haunting the third tunnel is the most jarring. This is what I remember. Years ago, this tunnel is said to have collapsed when a school bus collided with it, killing the driver and all of the children aboard. Oh. No one is really sure what happened, but at some point, the driver lost control of the vehicle, slamming into part of the rock. What happened afterwards is also unconfirmed. We know the tunnel collapsed, but whether the falling rock crushed the bus instantly or simply trapped it inside remains unclear. So they have this tunnel, and it's there is a fence around it, and I think I've seen it before. But so what they used to do, like all the new guys to the area, is like, hey, you want to go see something weird? So they said that you would pull up to the tunnel at night, turn off all your lights, turn off your car, put it in neutral, and your car would move. So if you park by the tunnel and put your car in neutral, your car would slowly move.
Oh,
and
yeah.
then you like hit the brakes and, like put it back in gear and go out and look. And there's going to be like little kids' handprints on your car. Like they're pushing it. And then they also say that if it's quiet enough, you can hear kids screaming, laughing, like saying weird stuff that comes out of the tunnel. Oh. And so they always used to dare people to go up there. And of course you tell the story and then you go up there and park. Now, a lot of times I'm sure they would have people hide and you turn everything off and they start to push your car. But that was the thing. And I also remember in high school, we'll say gangsters did it. They're like, no, go up and do this. And then, it turned into a whole thing. And like, that was a thing in high school for everybody to go up there and try to do this, and they'd scare you and stuff. So that's kind of a local one that I don't think we went over. But so I was asking some more, and there's a few that I remember from back in the day that were really weird. So the big one from Afghanistan is the giant of Kandahar.
The what? The
so
giant?
Allegedly, there's giants that live in Afghanistan. Now, these giants are from the biblical times.
Right.
Because that area is like from, Christian,
from the Book
Jewish,
of Enoch, right?
Islamic, to even predating that with the Greeks and the Romans and the Tibetans, like they've all been there. So you have Afghanistan, and there's like the religious culture of Afghanistan, like literally hits all religions. Like every religion on earth has been in Afghanistan, right? So there's a legend that there's these caves, because Afghanistan is full of caves, that there's giants that live there. So this is going back against like David versus the Goliath. Like that's a giant from that area and stuff. So allegedly there was a patrol in the mountains, and they're clearing out Taliban and stuff. And I've never talked to anybody that has anything to do with this, but it's out there. They think there's Taliban in a cave. One army unit goes in, they lose communication. So then they send in the Rangers. So there's a Ranger unit. I forget what detachment or whatever it was. And they went, and they're like looking in the cave, and they thought it was Taliban in there. And supposedly like somebody was kind of like walking in, and they're going to clear it out, and like a giant spear goes through the guy. And then they're like, what the heck? And like everybody's freaking out, and they're pulling back, and this giant comes out, like this 20-foot tall guy, like looks, no offense, but like a homeless person, beard, shaggy hair,
yeah,
loincloth, and he starts fighting him, and it takes like this whole Ranger unit to take this guy down. And then when they do, they call it in, and supposedly helicopters came in and picked up the giant, and like nobody could say anything after that they killed this giant down there. So that's one that you can find it on the internet. It's everywhere. I think they're making a movie of it, or they have made a movie of it. So
can you imagine? That would be super creepy. And then after all of this, and you've gone through this really harrowing, completely unexpected, they're like, we understand, but you have to shut up about it for the rest of your life. What is the probability that everybody's going to shut up about that, and no one's going to ever say anything? And that's why it's on the internet.
Because everything on the internet is true.
Everything.
So there's that one. So a few other people I asked. There was one guy, actually I was in the Mideast with him at the time, and we were like telling creepy stories, like, what's the weirdest thing you ever seen? And he said he was I think it was in England. So there's some military bases in England. They test a lot of stuff. There was like again, going back to UFOs, there were like UFO sightings there, and it turned out to be like the F-117 stealth fighter or the B-2 bomber and stuff, and they were flying it out in England. But there is an island in England where during World War II, they were testing chemical warfare, that sort of thing, like the bad stuff. Yeah. It was either World War I or World War II, and they tested anthrax on the island. So before that, they tested like mustard gas, all this crazy stuff. And it would kill a lot, and then everything would come back. And then I guess
what do you mean it would kill a lot?
Like the wildlife and stuff. It would decimate it, and then a year later, like plants would grow back, and there would be like bugs and stuff. So supposedly they tested anthrax there, and it just like wiped everything out and never came back. But there's a research facility there, and I think it is chemical weapons or biological, chemical, nuclear weapons research, because the Army still has that branch. I think it's one of the airborne units. The symbol is a dragon on it, but they just fight like chemical warfare. So if you're rolling up to a country and they have like mustard gas, like this unit comes in and they get rid of it and like mitigate it and stuff. And then they're also testing stuff to like neutralize it. I'm not going to say they're testing new stuff, but they probably are. And so anyway, this guy, I know he was in either an MP or Air Force Security Forces, probably Air Force Security Forces. And when you're security forces, MP, anything like that, so your basic job on a base is to make sure the base is secure, right?
Okay.
So a lot of the Air Force bases and Army bases, they had what was like a map in their CQ or like their command area. And so every door is alarmed on base.
Okay.
So, and think back, this technology was probably put in like the 60s and didn't change till like 5 years ago. So even when I was in, this was the standard technology. So you have this light board and a map, and if a door's not locked or a door's open, a red light comes up. So, I mean, it's just like a light bulb on a map. It's like a map of all the buildings, every door has a light bulb, or every entrance has a light bulb.
Okay.
And then if it's not shut, it's like, zzz, 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 a red light.
Yeah. Okay.
And then, so their job is to go, and what like I was trained to do, it's you go to the building, you say like, you report in, just like a police officer. You say, yep, the door's open. You have people secure the building. So you secure the perimeter, somebody watch the door. And then you have to go in room to room and secure it to make sure nobody's in there doing what they're not supposed to do.
So somebody forgets, that's why you're crazy about locking doors.
Yeah. And anybody that's been in the Air Force, when you cross the line on the flight line, you know what I'm talking about, where they'll tackle you if you just step over a stupid yellow line on the cement. Same thing with the doors. It's like you leave a door open, and if there's a door unsecure and you're in a building, they're going to tackle you and handcuff you and make sure you should be there, right? So this guy, we'll call him Doc, he goes in and they secure the perimeter. He goes in the building and he's searching, and there's people in the building. They're walking around, and it's a research facility. So it's like, dudes in lab coats, uniform, whatever, walking around. He's like, hey, and they're kind of looking at him weird, and they just like ignored him. And he's like, hey, stop. And he went in this room, and he opened this room, and there was, the way he described it, where there were gorillas on a table with their legs off, with like wires sticking out of their brain and their legs, and like robot arms on them. And like, he was like, freaked out. He's like, what the heck's going on here? And they're like, you cannot be in here. And then like some colonel came and was like, you need to get out now, and like ushered him out of the room and took him out. And they were like, yeah, you can't say anything about this. And he was like, and this would have been late 90s that he saw this. And I trust the guy. Like, I know he's not making it up. He's like, dude, that was the craziest thing I've ever seen. And like, oh my gosh, they came to him after that, and they were like, don't say anything about this. Like, he never signed an NDA, so I'm talking about it now. And he told a lot of people about it. He's like, I was just sick to my stomach. It was like all these animal robot hybrids in there, and like weird stuff going on. I was like, wow. So that was one. So another one that happened, and I kind of experienced this a little bit, but not like 100%. So when you're deployed back in 2001 in the Mideast, we had sensors. So when you set up like a bare base, or like you're out somewhere where there's nobody at, like there's certain like security measures you can set up to control an area. one of which were TAS and mid. So it's like these passive microwave sensors, which I don't think they use too much because I think they really hurt you. So it's like a microwave beam. You set up like a receiver here and then like a beam here, and anything that crosses it, it sets off an alarm. So anything that goes through, it's like an invisible fence. Come to find out, they're like really not good for you. So like people are setting them up and standing in front of them, and it's like, you know, waist high, and you're standing in front of a microwave emitter.
Yeah,
so like,
right.
You know,
like probably not a great idea.
VA will say it's not service connected that you have cancer in your midsection, but just kidding. Sorry. So like one other thing, because I think that technology was really old, and then the thermal imaging technology started to like really become more compact. So they had what were called WISTIs. So WISTI was basically a thermal camera. It's about the size of a toaster, right? Maybe a little bigger, like, I don't know, like a foot by a foot, and maybe 6 inches high, with this like big round, it looks like a metal ball on it. And you would run these towers up. So you could put it on top of a Humvee. You can have like a tower, like you know, if you look at military bases where they have the watchtowers, the LPOPs around it. So the guards could look like a guard tower at a prison. So they would run them up on this pole, and they'd go up. I forget the exact yards, but it was like, you know, 20 feet high or something like that. And that allows it to like see further on the horizon. And it was a thermal camera that could zoom in. You had a little control box. This was before flat screens and stuff. So it was this like cyberpunk, steampunk looking thing with the screen. You had a joystick, and basically you could like turn this camera around anyway and see anything in the distance, right?
Thermal, and it was thermal.
It was all thermal.
Okay.
And thermal does not see through glass, by the way, which nobody knows. So like in the movies and like video games, when you have like a thermal camera, it can't see through glass. So you want to get a thermal camera, surround yourself in glass. Mythbusters did it because they had thermal cameras to rob a bank, and they just made literally a glass box, and they could walk through it and the camera would not see them. Nobody knows that. But yeah, thermal.
Now you do.
Yeah, infrared's better, like night vision, but like for glass, thermal does not see through glass.
Interesting.
It like when you look at a building, you could see like the pipes in the walls, and if there's glass, it's just a blank box. But
at some point, this is going to become really important information.
Yes, or a thermal blanket, like one of those silver ones that firefighters use.
Oh, yeah.
I can't see through that either. But you look like a blank spot, so it can't tell. It's like,
it's just
this, it'd be like a blank
you
spot.
Look like a glitch.
Somebody's there.
Right. Okay.
Anyway, but they're really, really good at seeing those minute things from, I think it was like 20 miles away. You could like see if somebody is out there. We'd get false signals a lot, and then send people out to see if somebody's there. And I don't mean like a little blob, like bloop, like an animal. It would be like, hey, it looks like 3 people are standing there. Oh. And like nobody, you get out there and then they just disappear and stuff. So it's always like, yeah, just misread it. Or it was like an air vent, because, you know, stuff leaks out of the ground, and especially in the mountains, and like weather and stuff affects it.
Okay.
But what was really weird, when you would have like 2 or 3 of them looking at one area, and you'd still see stuff there. And then people would go out there and not see it, you know? And that would happen a lot. And they would just say like, it's something, it's an environmental issue, it's a glitch. But if you have 3 of them looking at it and like, hey, there's something right there, and then you get within 20 feet of it and then it disappears, that's weird.
That's creepy.
So this guy, and I was in with him, and he said they had one in, I think it was Afghanistan. I don't think it was Iraq. And this would have been 2003, 2004-ish. Before they had better stuff, because later they had more like acoustic sensors, like, you know, it got better instead of just this like camera on a pole. And he said they watched 3 people, and it was about half a mile away. They saw 3 people crawl up, it looked like, and then stand up and start walking, right? And so this is outside of the wire, like outside of the base. So this would have been a forward operating base. So it's like, you know, a box where everybody's in and there's nothing outside of it. It's not like in the green zone where there's a city or whatever. It's like literally in the middle of nowhere, and they're just looking for people trying to sneak up. So they saw 3 people, And a lot of times in Afghanistan and even Iraq and these places, you have like, it's very nomadic. So not everybody that's out there is a bad guy. You have people that have just been wandering around for years. Like people that would say like, oh, we're still at war with the Soviets. It's like, no, we're not. You know, they're like, oh, okay, well, I'm a goat herder. So they're not like killing everything that pops up on this thing, right? It's not like the movies, which I've been watching a lot of movies where it's like, hey, kill every. Anyway, side tangent. So they sent out, I think it was, it would have been an Air Force base. So they sent out like an element to go out there. So they call it for the Air Force folks out there, like a patrol element. Probably 4 guys, 3 guys, whatever. And they're watching them and they pulled the, you know, they bring the Humvee up. And so they have that and providing overwatch. And then, you know, they're within, they guide them in. They're like, no, they're like 100 yards in front of you. And they're like, we can't see anything. They have night vision on. They're like, they're right in front of you. So then 3 guys get out and they kind of go around, or 4 guys get out and they're like, where are they at? And they're like, they're literally right in front of you. And they're like, there's nothing in front of us. And they had night vision on. And they're like, you're looking at, and like he said, they even had, like they pointed. They're like, I'm going to reach my hand out and point. Tell me if I'm pointing in the right direction. And he said he reached his hand out and pointed and he was down, like kneeling. They're like, the person is like 5 feet in front of you.
Oh my gosh.
And he's like, and again, they had night vision on. There's like nobody in front of us. And they're like, well, we're seeing it. And he's like, you're seeing it wrong. And so they had 2 cameras looking at it and both cameras saw it. They're like, no, they're right in front of you. So he's like, he was like, F it, I'm just going to stand up. And he stood up and started walking forward. And they said the 3 figures ran and disappeared. Oh. And he's like, we never saw anything. And they had lights. And that was the other thing. He was like, it was all night vision. And he's like, I'm going to stand up and look. And they turned on their lights. And he's like, there's nobody in front of us. And then the 2 thermal cameras saw him run.
That is creepy.
Again, this is all secondhand information. But the guy that told me this, like, he's like, no, this is like legit. He's like, you could even call the people I was with and they'll verify the whole thing. He said they were, and then they had video of it. I was like, do you have the video? So not video from the camera, like somebody had a camcorder and filmed the screen and was like, look, we're not crazy. Cause he also said he thought they were messing with him.
Oh yeah.
And he's like, they're like, no, they like filmed it and he saw the tape and he's like, we were like right in front. Like I could have touched the person standing and it wasn't like a blob. It wasn't like a weird thing. It was like 3 people in front of him. And then
they got on camera as soon as he stood up and started walking toward him. They all,
he said they ran and
he
just
didn't hear
disappeared.
anything.
They just, no, nothing at all. But from 2 different of these thermal cameras, they saw this.
That is creepy. All right. So I know, do you have one more?
I might.
Okay, so
I have a lot.
I know Chad Vorthman is listening, and so a lot of our other listeners will be mad at me if I don't ask you, Brian McCain, what's the weirdest thing you ever saw?
I mean, that Man in Black thing is kind of weird.
That's not the weirdest thing you've ever seen, though.
I thought about this because I was trying to think. There's like, I mean, there's like very random coincidences that seem to be more than coincidences that I think everybody experiences these. It's kind of like when we're like, hey, I haven't called. Hey, we'll bring up Michelle Gardner. Like you're like, I haven't talked to Michelle Gardner in a while.
Yeah.
And then she calls you.
Yeah.
Right then. Or, there's that stuff that happens that is that a coincidence? Also, are you thinking along with somebody and you know them enough that it pops up in their head like patterns you're going through. Because
we do that a lot. Like if we haven't heard from each other by like around 8 o'clock, that's you know what I mean?
So there's that aspect of it. But one really, this is so bizarre. And again, it's like, it's coincidences. Like it's just a coincidence, but it's so weird. And this isn't even like a spooky story. So I was in German class. I took German in middle school. Okay. So my mom lived in Germany growing up because my grandpa was in the Marines and then he went into the Air Force. And so he did 10 years in the Marines. Oh, actually, I do have another story about that.
Okay,
but he did our 8 years in the Marines and then like 12 years in the Air Force, and his family hates him because he has like 15 brothers and sisters, and they're all Marines, and he left the Marines to go in the Air Force.
Oh.
One reason why he did that is because if he transferred to the Air Force, he was allowed to go to Germany for 6 to 8 years, and he wanted to go to Germany.
Okay.
And he went to Germany. They actually lived off base for a while,
Okay.
which was insane back in the 70s because that's when there were still bombings and stuff.
Yeah.
So he lived off base. So my mom and uncle and aunts, they lived in Germany, and I think they lived there for 6 years. So they made really good friends with this family there. And when I got to high school, went to Germany kind of as a pseudo foreign exchange student, where I got out of some of my semester here to go live there. And it was with my family friends, right? So it's like with the people that know my family, they always come and visit us. They're like, Brian, you need to come out to Germany. It's like, okay, I'm going to go out to Germany for like 4 months. I got off from high school. I got like high school credit because luckily the lady that I was staying with, my family's friend, was a high school teacher. And she's like, oh no, I'm going to teach them all this stuff.
Oh, nice.
And so I was going into German, and I had German homework. The only homework I had when I was in Germany was German homework from German class in high school, which is bizarre. Like that was the only requirement, is that I take these German tests. And so I'm like, oh man, I don't have, like, I left the test, and I literally flew home, and I was going to go back to school like 2 days after I got home. And I freaked out because I left my German tests at home. And I mean, it was a lot. It was like, 2 months of high school homework,
Oh yeah.
And I was like, dang it. Like, why? Like, this sucks because I'm going to go home and I'm going to fail German while I was in Germany. Like, one of those stupid things.
Right.
And I was at the Frankfurt airport getting ready to fly home. And one of my friends from middle school, who was also in the German class, I'm like walking through the airport, and I was like, Jeremy? And he's like, Brian?
What?
And I ran into this guy that I went through 6th, 7th, and 8th grade with, who was in my German class in 9th grade.
Okay.
And I ran into him in the airport 2 days before I would be home and have to have my homework due. And I was like, holy cow. And it was weird because I was like, I know that guy. And I go talk to him, and I'm talking to him. He's like, hey. And I'm like, what are you doing here? He's like, oh, I'm flying out here for my family and all this stuff. I'm like, yeah, I'm flying home. And I get it. It's like the airport. Like, that's not so weird. And he's like, did you do your German homework? And I'm like, no. And he's like, I brought an extra copy.
Shut
and I was
up.
Like, no way. He's like, yeah. So he gives me the homework, and I do it on the plane back.
The universe loves you, Brian McKay.
So then I get back. And then, so I stayed with my family friends. And then they had friends, and one of the kids was my age. His name was Peter. They're like, you want to go stay at Peter's house? He's your age, And I'm like, yeah, like, why not?
Yeah.
And I got to be really good friends with this guy. And he's like, and he didn't know where I was from. And he's like, calls me up like 2 years later, and I still talk to him. We would mail as before, like internet, Facebook and all this stuff. This would have been like 94-ish. And he writes me, he's like, hey, I'm coming to the United States. I'm like, oh, what are you doing? He's like, well, I'm playing racquetball. And it was for like, he was on like a racquetball scholarship program or something like that. It's like, yeah, they're sending me to this university. He's like, I don't have anywhere to stay. I'm like, oh, where are you going? He's like, Pueblo, Colorado. And I'm like, right there. So then he comes back, and I'm like, what the heck's going on here?
So do you still speak German? I've
Just
never heard
very
you.
little.
I've never heard you speak German.
Very little. But it was like a weird set of coincidences that all tied together. And then even when I got married, like both of those families were coming through Denver at the same time, and they came to my wedding, and it was just random. Like they're like, hey, I hadn't heard from Peter in like years. And he was like, hey, I'm in Denver this weekend. And he was a pilot. So he was flying back and forth from Germany. And he was like a FedEx pilot or something like that, but he had to get his hours in the United States. So he'd come to the United States and fly around. He's like, yeah. He's like, where are you at? Like, I'm flying from Denver to Pueblo tomorrow. And I'm like, it's my wedding. So it's like just coincidence after coincidence with these, like the
same
German
group.
Yeah.
You guys are all connected.
So that's not spooky, but that's like the most random weird thing that's happened.
So I don't think we give enough credit to the fact that we're all connected in ways we know and in ways we don't know.
I met so many people in Germany that had some random connection to like Colorado and knew of things I was talking about. And then I knew even the connection thing, it was like, again, coincidences, but it's still weird, like Rapid City, South Dakota. Like I went to high school with somebody from South Dakota, and I went to South Dakota to visit my aunt and uncle, and they were neighbors with them. And then Idaho Falls was the same way, like all these random, I just wish that would like pan out for the lottery or something. Like a weird coincidence, but.
Well, I think we're out of time. Yes.
About 48 minutes. We got some more time.
Oh, we got. More. Give me one more. Give me one really more. Good one. One that's going to keep me. The one that I'm going to keep. That's going to really creep me out.
So my grandpa. This is a long one. This might take like 2 whole episodes. So my grandma, my mom's mom, my grandma Betty, and my grandpa Bud. My grandma Betty was the daughter of my grandma Schmick. My grandma Schmick is not actually my blood grandmother. So my grandpa Schmick was and this is in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia, or outside of Philadelphia. My grandpa Schmick was a World War II guy, got like hit on a ship. They thought he was dead. Basically threw him in with a bunch of bodies. The ship got shelled still, and he was alive, and he came out, was never right since, like basically lost his hearing. He could barely hear. PTSD really bad. Became a judge, remarried or got married. And then that was my real great grandmother. And then she's like, hey, I'm going to go to the store. You guys want anything to the kids? And then just disappeared off the face of the earth. Never figured out what happened to her, but he was also a judge. And he owned a broom factory, and it was where the Betty broom comes after. It's named after my grandmother. So the Betty broom, which was the red straw brooms that used to be back in the day, that's the Betty broom. That's named after my grandma. And they own an American flag company, like the largest one. And so he remarries my grandma Schmick. And I think actually my grandma Schmick, her family owned that stuff. So he might have married into that. But he was a judge, kind of a corrupt judge. He was the main Mason for the country. Okay. And my grandma Schmick was...
For the country?
Yeah, for the country. He was like, whatever the grand... I don't know.
I don't know.
Like all my family's into Masons until I hit my parents' generation, and they're like lame. Yeah. And then my grandma Schmick was the president or whatever, the Eastern Stars, which is the wife version of the Masons, The female, so she was like in charge of the Eastern Stars. My grandpa was in charge of the Masons and all this stuff. And probably a corrupt judge. They owned a hotel. It had a lot of weird rooms in it and secret rooms. We go stay out there as kids, and like he was tied with the unions and supposedly the mob. And like, I mean, you could Google it, like George Schmick, and like it comes up like weird stuff from the 50s, 60s.
I will be Googling that later. Yeah.
But so my grandma Betty and my uncle GB, they lived in a hotel, like a very nice hotel. They had like their own room and stuff. And I had to look this up too. So my grandma, when I was little, she's like, oh yeah, there's aliens. Like they come in and abduct people all the time. It happened to us. I'm like 5, like what? And she's like, you should watch these unsolved mysteries and like the movie Communion and read these books. And so they claim, and my grandma, she's like, I probably remembered it wrong. I was young, like whatever. I don't know what to believe. But my uncle GB like wholeheartedly believes this. So she and he said that they would be at home alone. It would be like they'd be playing outside. They'd go in and sit there, and the hotel was kind of on this hill. They had like a swimming pool, but it was like there was an orchard and like kind of a valley. Like they were well off there. And they said they would see spaceships land, and people would get out, and then they would go to bed. And my uncle GB said they would take them on the spaceships. And I'm like, first off, I'm like 5 and they're telling me these stories. Probably where my weird fascination with UFOs came from.
Maybe, yes.
And like terrified. Like I was terrified growing up that like there was aliens and they're going to...
Especially if you were going out to visit them and staying at this hotel.
Oh, yeah. And they swear to it by this day. And so I finally, like my family, like my aunts and uncles are like, we're calling BS on this. Like, I don't know if it was like a traumatic childhood that's causing them to think this, and like abandonment or fantasy and stuff. So we pulled it up about 5 years ago, And there's like multiple news reports of like flying saucers seen in the area and like all the stuff that, that's like on point with it.
With Grandma Betty.
Yeah. And so that's weird. And then my grandpa Bud, so he went from the Marines to the Air Force in his first duty station in the Air Force. So he went from like, Marine Corps infantry, like everybody's a rifleman. He was like, I'm going to make a living off of this. So I went to the Air Force and he did like HVAC, which was like a new thing in the 60s and stuff. So he got stationed at Quantico, first in the Marines, transferred to the Air Force, and then got stationed at the White House. So he was under the JFK administration.
Okay.
And so he would, I mean, back in the day, it's like, you'd think this is lame, but it was like, he's like, yeah, I did the air conditioning in the White House. And he's like, I did like all this stuff. And he's like, I put on the like cooling system on JFK's yacht. And I'm like, man, that was like the days when you just get somebody to do it. But like, it's pretty cool. So he had this like whole, and he loves history and he loves the Civil War and he loves metal detecting. He still goes metal detecting. He has like a Civil War collection that I've never seen anything like it. And like, he has some Washington campaign buttons that they got like at the inauguration. It's like on, National Treasure when he's like, I have the 5th button. And she's like, nobody's found the 5th button. Kind of BS because there's a lot of them out there, but he has like that button and stuff. And, so he's out there and he's at Quantico and he's at the White House and doing all this stuff. And my mom was born in West Virginia during that time too. And, he said they went on a road trip because he'd love to travel again, taking the kids to Germany and living off base, and, like, traveling and stuff. Like any service members listen to this, like get off base and go see stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe not so much now. It's not as safe, but, they went on a road trip and he was like, yeah, there was like, I thought it was a plane because he also worked around the U2s, the U2 planes.
Okay.
And, the U-2s are the Dragon Lady planes.
Right.
They were the spy planes. One was shot down.
At that time, they were the most cutting edge technology.
He worked around them because he had his clearance. And they were leaving on a road trip and he saw like something. And he's like, is that a U-2 flying low? Like, what is it? And I guess my grandma was like, they're coming back after me, and like freaked out and like passed out in the car. And he's like, it was weird. He's like, I could see windows on it. And then it just disappeared and like flew off.
What?
But yeah, he worked on the U-2s or with the U-2s, and then he came to Colorado and he was stationed at NORAD, and it was back in the day, like this would have been the 70s, late 70s, because I think he retired in 79 ish when my mom was born, or when I was born. I mean, I'm not that young. I wish my mom was born in 79. And he tells, like back in the day at NORAD, that it was 50-50 men and women. So,
at NORAD?
Yeah. So if you worked at NORAD,
it was 50-50 men and women.
Yes, because in case there was a nuclear war, to repopulate the Earth, and they were all paired up with somebody. And so he said he had this like very angry tech sergeant that was his partner and stuff. But he continued, really even out of the service, he still worked there because he took us on tours of NORAD growing up. So I went like 3 times as a kid and got a tour of NORAD and all that.
How many times have you been to NORAD?
A lot. It's been a long time since I've been there, but before they closed it down, because they moved it. Yeah. I mean, it's open. They go back and forth, but yeah. And then he went, after that, he went to the Mideast. He worked in Saudi Arabia and Pakistan and those places. And like,
is he still around?
Mm-hmm. He's still around.
Let's get him on the show.
Yeah, he's got some very interesting stories and some really weird stuff.
So would he say that there is a tunnel between DIA and NORAD? Underground?
No, there is not a tunnel between DIA and NORAD.
Not underground tunnel between DIA and NORAD?
No, but there is from like the Air Force Academy probably to NORAD to Peterson and stuff. No, there's a whole underground tram system. Like I've actually been and seen it, and nobody remembers it, and the tunnels are collapsed, but I think they set it up. Originally, I think they planned to have this Cold War bunker where they can move, but I don't think anything was ever finished, and it's just there.
So DIA is weird, but...
Well, I did the mural there, the New World Order mural.
You did that?
Did I talk about this on the show?
No. But there's a show about how weird that is.
Yeah. So...
what do you mean you did that?
Yeah, so Leo Tanguma was the artist that did that, and what he would do is go into impoverished communities, and he would have high school students, like low income families. He's a Latino activist, and he's like, we're here to take care of Latinos. And he's an artist, and he's a muralist. So if anybody knows the history of muralism, it like really starts in Spain and Mexico. So like murals are huge in Mexico. Murals are, you know, and it's very political. Like, and they're getting back to that now. So he would go around, and he did one at USC at the time, CSU Pueblo, but prior to CSU Pueblo. So we did one, and it was about domestic violence, because at the time in Pueblo there was like a lot of like crazy domestic violence going on. This would have been 99, 2000-ish. And so he came in, and he was an instructor. So, you know, they do instructors where it's like a special session or whatever, where you could take a class, get 3 credits, and do 2 weeks in the summer. Right. So he came down and he did a mural. And what I did, instead of paint, I painted a little bit and drew on it. But he got the art students, and then he got high schoolers to come and contribute to this mural. And the idea was like, you know, end domestic violence, but he lets the teenagers come up with the mural and the message on it. Right.
Okay.
And so I filmed it instead of like drawing. I was like, this would be more interesting to film, because I knew they were going to set it up, and it was in the cafeteria for a while, and everybody hated it. And, I'm like, yeah, you get a bunch of high schoolers around, they're going to draw like skeletons and like demons and stuff. And that's what they did. Yeah. And I'm like, we got to film this. So I worked. So instead of like actively painting, I drew a little bit on it, but I filmed the whole thing and interviewed him on what it was about. And he was cool as heck. And he's done a lot in Colorado, and he's a veteran. So like he was more interested in the veteran stuff, which he's this community activist, Latino activist, that type of thing. And then he's like all veteran too. And like, he was really interested in that. So I was in the military at the time. It was pre-September 11th, but I was still like taking classes here and there and like getting ready to go back to training. And, he's like, hey, I'm doing the Denver, the DIA mural. He's like, when it's time, do you want to come and help with that? And he's like, I'd love to like film it, because it was like my first professional filming job that I did. And it came out really cool. And he's like, would you like to come up and film it or help? And I was like, yeah. So he got commissioned to do this mural. And the idea was DIA was the biggest airport on Earth. Yeah. Or in the country. I can't remember. It was like, it was the biggest airport in North America. It might have been the world. I forget, but it was also
so much like weird, unexplained, odd things about this airport.
Yeah, sort of. I think it's just what happens when a bureaucracy like tries to make a luggage system. But what happened was he got at the time, like a lot of the Denver high school and college kids were very low income, and it was like bad. And so he did this community art project. He did one in Castle Rock. He did one in Aurora. He did a ton around Denver. They got the commission for the Denver mural. And the idea was, this is an international airport, and we're putting everything aside, and this is where we come together. It's in the middle of the United States, which is the melting pot, and we don't care about race, religion, creed, like leave it all behind. We're all coming here. We're all in it as one. Let's throw, he would always say, like, let's throw down our arms and join hands. The children are the future.
Oh, yeah.
So what happens when you get, also, let me add this tidbit into, so a lot of the high school kids and college kids that he got to help with this mural, they were in trouble. So it was not like your average high schooler. Right. It was like in a lot of trouble.
He's looking at sort of a lifeline, outlet, something. Yeah, something
and
to give them.
And a lot of these kids were in trouble for tagging at the time.
Okay.
And so he's like, all right, guys, let's get together, paint this huge mural. And we want to say, like, you know, the armies are evil and the militaries are evil and the corporations are evil. And this is all about coming together and joining hands. So, of course, they painted like dudes with gas masks and swords.
Oh, my gosh.
There is no controversy behind it. It was a bunch of dumbass high schoolers that like to paint like scary skeletons and scary people and army dudes and robots.
So I love those shows or YouTube or Netflix or whatever where they're like, and look at this, and this is this weird thing about DA, and this is this weird thing about DA, and this is weird thing. Of course, you would have worked on that every single day with you. It's something else with you every day.
I mean, I worked on a lot with him because he's a Colorado artist, but at the same time, like when I laugh at those because, yeah, what's going to happen when you get a bunch of like high school delinquents together for spray painting like skeletons and dudes with machine guns on a wall and say, hey, paint a mural with like soldiers on it. And I heard they got rid of half of it. I don't think only half of it's there. But all the conspiracies is like, look, it's like Israel and Palestine, which is going on now, like at the front. And like, it's the corporations like over the kids. I'm like, no, it's like, hey, like paint a bunch of evil adults and the kids joining hands. There you go. That was it. No conspiracy. Like I have probably 12 hours of video recorded on that whole project.
That is hilarious.
And it was, I mean, it was like so bad where he's like, you cannot paint naked women on this. Like that type of thing.
Oh my
Like the one that we did at CS or USC at the time, it was like a guy punching a girl. It was against domestic violence, and it was like, when are you going to rise up? And it's like a guy like smashing a girl's face on the ground. And it's like, and everybody's like, this is pretty evil. And I'm like, that's not the point. But again, you get like 30 high schoolers together in trouble for painting bad stuff, and you tell them to paint bad stuff. What are they going to paint? No conspiracy behind that.
So there's like 5 years between us, like 5 years difference. And maybe we grew up in, for the most part, maybe 30 miles apart.
Yeah.
We had very, very, very different upbringings.
Oh yeah, it's that whole mural, and I hope Leo's still alive. He's such a good, soft-spoken guy.
Oh, I want to meet him.
But he was
that is a creepy mural.
Yeah,
like I remember looking at this and going, I don't know what's happening here. As I was running through the airport at one point, you know, you go through the airport, and then I saw this. What do we call it?
There's actually
like a documentary.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh, actually, the Colorado Sun just released an article on the true story of the murals at Denver International Airport, and it says this basically what I just said. I didn't know this was out there 28 years ago. Yeah,
that is weird. All right, so we're going to share the link. Let's share the link to that article.
I will. I'm saying. I mean, there's political stuff behind it, and
you're like, it's not. It was just this really good-hearted artist trying to give some.
So we did. I remember this,
kids
I mean, I
an
didn't.
Outlet.
I didn't actually. I didn't really work. I just filmed some of it and added my 2 cents to it and touched some stuff up, but. Yeah, I said we did have a few people come in at the time when we were painting it. They said, don't paint this. There's a new world order. We had no idea what they were talking about back then. As soon as the conspiracy theories began, Tanguma lost 2 valuable commissions, and according to Darlene, both of them were harassed, even death threats.
What?
You need to destroy the art. Yeah, I mean,
people can get kind of crazy.
Yeah, it's like this is the community. Again, it's ironic that another coincidence. This just came out. Children of the World, Dream in Peace. That was the title of the mural, and I think they took half of it down.
They did.
And again, it was about connecting Colorado to the rest of the world. I don't like he says he painted it because there were kids painting it. Anyway, that's him right there. So you could say.
Oh.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's, yeah. So I don't know if that was a good Halloween episode or.
There's a couple things that creeped me out. If I only ever see like, there's one man I always see, he's in a fedora, but they're different colored fedoras. He's a very cool cat that walks around.
There's a man in black.
That is creepy.
That is weird.
Like that is
it's
weird.
Totally weird.
That is like, pretty weird.
Yeah.
But, well, thanks so much. We appreciate all of our listeners, and we did this one especially for you. We had a few people say, well, what are you going to do with your Halloween episode?
And the views and opinions expressed on Making Action Happen do not reflect the views and opinions of Action 22, its board, or its membership. Yep. And that includes with FEMA and Men in Black and UFOs, the New World Order, and all that stuff.
And even Bigfoot, which actually is real.
Maybe.
Nope.
I mean, the Air Force Academy kids said they saw Bigfoot up there.
That's another story.
They might be drinking. That might have been an excuse to get.
I'm just telling you, it's
I
real.
don't know. They can't drink.
We'll see you guys next time.
All right. Bye.